So one really important thing about a lot of this kind of deep sea work is to kind of get a baseline of what organisms are there now. We've done some work around Iceland in the deep sea looking at organisms and where they're found and where they're not found. And we can compare that information to things like water temperature and water chemistry, and then forecast what might happen in the future if these climate change projections are right. What would happen to a lot of the organisms that can only live in really narrow temperature margins, things like that. And in some cases it's really scary because organisms that seem to be broadly distributed, if climate change forecasts come true, they'll be very reduced or go extinct. So most of my research takes place on ships where we're collecting deep sea invertebrate animals using gear like trawls, basically the same thing that fishermen do, just have smaller versions of them. And so we'll tow this trawl behind the ship for a while and collect samples, and a big net will come up, and it's basically just a big bag that's filled with mud. And so we have the joy of taking this huge bag full of mud and sieving it through big screens of kind of decreasing mesh size to pull the big animals out and then smaller and smaller animals out. And most of the people I work with are looking at these relatively large animals to study different aspects of their biology or whatever. And I take the bottom sieves and run off to the microscope room and then look at all that under the microscope. And it looks like bits of sand and shell and things like that, but under the microscope it's full of life, and most of the diversity of animals are pretty small. So there's entire groups of animals that are only going to be found in these kind of bottom, really fine sieve screens. And so a lot of my time on the ship is looking at a dish of water that's doing this back and forth, looking through sand for microscopic animals and things like that. And because the Antarctic and a lot of deep sea areas are really poorly studied, everything we find is basically new. So there's lots of discoveries to be made and finding lots of new groups of organisms and things like that.